The San Jose Sharks could very well be competitive in 2025-26, and it will not take a lot of massive changes to do so. Hey everybody, welcome to the second installment of Fix Your Franchise, the series where I go through all of the non-playoff teams and give my breakdown of what I would do in the off-season if I were, the GM or the owner. Thank you to everybody who gave support to the Chicago Blackhawks episode. If you want to see more of these, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps a lot. But today we are talking about the San Jose Sharks, a team that is the worst in the NHL right now by points, and thus would seem to be very far from being a competitive team once again. But in going through and doing this episode like I did with the Blackhawks, I was surprised to find that I think that the Sharks are not only closer than most people think, I think they're also closer than the Blackhawks with the players that they have on their team right now, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. First things first, I want to go through where the San Jose Sharks are as an organization and what their game plan should be for this offseason. Unlike the Blackhawks, who have a young superstar in Connor Bedard on the last year of his rookie contract next year, the San Jose Sharks only have Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith going into the second years of their contracts. Unlike the Blackhawks, who had 8 first-round picks over the last 3 years, including 3 picks in the top 10, the San Jose Sharks in the last 3 years have only had 5 picks in the first round, including only 2 of those being top 10 picks, both of those top 5, and they did have an 11 overall pick in Sam Dickinson. The point being, though, that they are not quite as far into their rebuild as the Chicago Blackhawks, and thus they need to take a slightly different tactic from the Blackhawks, who I said should be aggressive in trying to make a push to be a playoff team next year and take advantage of the last year of Connor Bedard's rookie deal. For the Sharks, I think that they definitely should be trying to be competitive, but they should not be sacrificing future assets to do so like the Blackhawks conceivably could. Their goal should be to get better and to start to learn how to win, but they don't necessarily need to be a playoffs or bust kind of team like I think the Blackhawks should be at this point. And so I will not be suggesting that they make as big of moves as I did for the Blackhawks, but I do think that they have a path to being competitive like Chicago does. But let's start at the top of the organization with the executive suite and GM Mike Grier, who has had a pretty rough go of it as a GM from a record perspective. He has an overall record of 59, 138, and 34 over his 3 years as GM of the Sharks. However, given that his team has been focused on rebuilding, I don't want to say that the record is the end-all and be-all in evaluating him. Instead, we should be looking at the prospect pool that he has amassed for the San Jose Sharks, and it is quite good. According to the Hockey Writers midseason evaluation, the San Jose Sharks have the 4th best prospect pool in the NHL currently. When you break down how the individual prospects rank compared to the others in their top 100, you have 1 player in the top 10, Sam Dickinson, who they took in the first round last year, 2 players in the top 50 in Quentin Musty and Shakir Mukhamadullin, but they also have 4 players who are in the top 100 in Philip Bystedt, Igor Chernyshov, Kasper Halttunen, and Leo Sandin-Wallenius. Now, Mukhamadullin is currently playing for the San Jose Sharks, so he is technically not really a prospect at this point, but overall I think Grier has done a great job assembling not only a group of good prospects, but also young players, including Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith, along with some of the players he inherited, like Will Eklund and Mario Ferraro. In addition, I think he's done a really good job in trades. Obviously, he made a killing by taking on Jake Wallman for nothing and then trading him away for a first-round pick. He also got a first-round pick and a third-round pick for Mikael Granlund, which is why the San Jose Sharks are currently slated to have multiple first and second-round picks in the next 2 NHL drafts. So even though the record doesn't look great, I would still definitely keep Mike Grier around as GM. I really love what he's done. As for head coach Ryan Warsofsky, he's only been here 1 year, and obviously they have not performed very well, so I can't really be too harsh on him. The only thing I will say is that in going through this exercise and looking at the talent on this team, I do think that the Sharks should be a little bit better than they are, and I'll get into that as I go through the lineup breakdown. However, when it comes to looking at some statistics that I think are good indicators of coaching, I start to get a lot more concerned about Warsofsky. The Sharks are the worst team in the NHL when it comes to holding on to leads going into the third period. They're bottom 10 in both net penalties, which means the difference between penalties drawn and taken, and they are bottom 10 in bench minors, which is a penalty that is entirely within the coach's control. Now, because they are a rebuilding team and they're not so talented, I wouldn't put too much weight into these statistics, But nonetheless, I do not have the confidence in Warsofsky as a coach as I do in Mike Grier as a GM. I would still hold on to him for another year at least, but I would say that the Sharks definitely need to show some improvements if Warsofsky wants to hold on to his job long term. But now let's go into the roster and do a breakdown of where they are right now. This is their lineup as of March 15th, 2025. And just like I did with the Chicago Blackhawks, I took a look at this lineup, evaluated it by their productivity this year and the last few years to see which which players fit into the 8 types of players that most Stanley Cup teams over the last 10 years have had to see how far the Sharks are from being in that conversation, and it was pretty brutal. As it stands right now, the Sharks really only have one top 6 winger in Tyler Toffoli. They do not have a number 1 center. They do not have a number 2 center, although Macklin Celebrini could fill that role if they got a number 1 center theoretically to replace him. They do not have a number 1 defenseman, and the only legitimate top 4 defenseman on a Stanley Cup team that they have right now is Mario Ferraro. Alexander Georgiev could be a piece of a 1A, 1B goalie tandem, but I don't think he's a number 1A right now. So it looks grim for the San Jose Sharks. However, looking at a lot of these younger players, I do see the potential for them to potentially get to some of these roles next year. Namely, Macklin Celebrini, I think, is very close to being a number 1 center, even though he is not one right now. William Eklund right now is a legit top 6 winger, but he could easily become a top line winger next year if he continues on this career trajectory, and that would mean that you have a top line of William Eklund, Macklin Celebrini, and Tyler Toffoli, who are a legitimate top line that could play on a Stanley Cup contending team. Will Smith also is on a trajectory to be a top 6 winger next year, and Yaroslav Askarov could absolutely develop into a guy who's a legit number 2 on a 1A, 1B team. So there are pieces there for the San Jose Sharks if the players continue to develop, particularly in the forward core, so the Sharks really only have to make a few moves to theoretically be competitive next year. Now, the only real area that I see as being a weakness that needs to be filled externally next year is number 2 center. Right now they have Alexander Wenberg there. He is not a number 2 center. He is a perfect number 3, but the Sharks desperately need somebody who can legitimately play second power play unit minutes and help drive the play for guys like Will Smith and Igor Chernyshov, who I have projected as going to the NHL team next year. And luckily for the Sharks, there are actually a lot of very experienced players that you could bring in who can be your number 2 center next year. They're all a little bit on the older side, but I think that that's actually a good thing because the Sharks need some veteran experience. The first guy I'll shout out is John Tavares. I think he would be a perfect fit, a former captain of 2 teams. He's played with a core of very young superstars in Toronto. He's gotten teams to the playoffs, and he's been a playoff hero in the New York Islanders. And he's going to be in that tier of free agents that not a lot of people are paying attention to, but I think the San Jose Sharks would be very smart to jump on him. Another guy that I would really love to see in San Jose is Matt Duchene of the Dallas Stars. Not only would he be a great veteran add who has been on multiple deep playoff runs with Dallas, he would be siphoning away strength from another team in your division. Brad Marchand from the Florida Panthers now could easily be a guy who shakes free in free agency. I don't know if Florida's going to have the ability to keep him. Another guy who has been a captain, a Stanley Cup champion, gone on multiple deep playoff runs. His experience would be invaluable to the Sharks. And then finally, Brock Nelson, recently acquired by the Avalanche, would be another solid option. So the Sharks have a lot of opportunities to add a number 2 center this offseason. Now, as far as the bottom 6 goes, I really don't think that the Sharks need to make a lot of adjustments down there. I think they have a perfectly serviceable bottom 6. If they wanted to give a guy like Quentin Musty or Philip Bysted some minutes down there on the 3rd line, I'd be fine with that. But you can get by with Alex Wenberg as your 3rd line center, Goodrow, Costin, Gregor, Giles, and Dellandrea down there. However, where the Sharks do need a lot of help is on the back end. Like I mentioned, right now they only have Ferraro as a legit top 4 defenseman, and while you can hope that Mukhamadullin will continue to develop and that Sam Dickinson maybe can step in next year, I think asking them to be top 4 defensemen, let alone a number 1 defenseman at this stage in their careers, is a tall order. I would be looking externally to add at least 1 top 4 defenseman and potentially a number 1 defenseman. Now, for the number 1 defenseman, obviously, unlike the Blackhawks, I don't think that they're in a position to trade for Erik Karlsson, because like I mentioned, they should not be trading away premium assets at this point. They can still go after the 2 guys I recommended the Blackhawks go after in free agency, Ivan Provorov and Dmitry Orlov. Both are really more number 2 guys, but I think they could be a decent number 1 option in a pinch for the Sharks. And then as far as other top 4 defensemen, I really wouldn't like to see him go as a Caps fan, but Jacob Chychrun could be a great add for the San Jose Sharks. Also, Neil Pionk, who I mentioned as an option for the Chicago Blackhawks, would be a good add. And then a guy that I would really like to see San Jose make a run after if he shakes free from Florida is Aaron Ekblad, which would add more veteran leadership and playoff experience. And as I mentioned, in goal, I think that they should stick with Georgiev and Askarov as a 1-2 combo. It's not an ideal duo, and this could ultimately become an Achilles heel if the San Jose Sharks actually become contenders, but there aren't many great options out there in free agency or trade, and banking on Askarov's development isn't a bad option in my opinion. But with all of these moves, I do think that the San Jose Sharks have a window to being more competitive next year than they were this year. They already have some really good forwards who are on the cusp of developing into elite status like Eklund and Celebrini, and they have a lot of very intriguing prospects, especially on the back end, who could make the team a bit more dangerous next year. If they make a couple of adds, especially second line center, and add one more defenseman in the offseason, which they can do with their salary cap, the Shark Tank will become a very dangerous place to swim once again.